Imagine opening your eyes in a world where no one can speak. No names, no warnings, no stories passed down at night. You feel hunger, fear, love, anger, but you cannot explain any of it with words. So here's a question that sounds simple, but isn't. Before language existed, how did humans communicate at all? Before we begin, subscribe to the channel for cinematic, curiosity-driven stories about the forgotten moments that shaped humanity. Now, let's go back. Long before the first word was spoken, humans were already living together. They hunted in groups, they raised children, they defended each other against predators. But they did all of this without language. No way to say, danger. No way to say, help me. No way to say, stay close. And yet, they survived. Early humans lived in a world where attention meant life. Every sound mattered. Every movement could be a warning. When a predator approached, there was no shout, no word, no name for the threat. Instead, there was the body. A sudden stillness, wide eyes, a sharp intake of breath. Others noticed immediately. Fear moved faster than words ever could. This was humanity's first language, not spoken, but seen. Hands pointed, heads tilted, bodies leaned forward or pulled back. A raised arm meant stop. A quick crouch meant hide. Running meant follow, now. These gestures were not random. They were learned through repetition, danger, and survival. Over time, movements became meaningful. A clenched fist always meant the same thing. A certain look always carried the same warning. Meaning was born without sound. But survival wasn't only about fear. Humans needed cooperation. Picture a hunt. A group hides behind rocks as a massive animal grazes nearby. No one speaks. One person slowly raises two fingers. Another lowers a hand toward the ground. Everyone understands. Not because of words, but because of shared experience. This silent understanding required something powerful, the ability to read others. Faces became messages. Raised eyebrows meant surprise. Tight jaws meant anger. Soft eyes meant safety. In a world without words, emotion was information. To survive, humans had to feel what others felt. Empathy wasn't kindness, it was necessity. If someone looked afraid, danger was near. If someone looked calm, it was safe to rest. But this system had limits. Gestures only worked when others could see you. Expressions failed in darkness. Complex ideas couldn't be passed to children easily. As groups grew larger and life grew more complicated, the need to communicate more became impossible to ignore. Something new was coming. Not words yet, but sounds. Simple noises, cries, grunts. Meaningless at first, but full of potential. Silence was humanity's first language. But silence had limits. Gestures worked only when others could see you. Expressions failed in darkness, fog, or tall grass, and danger didn't always wait to be noticed. So slowly, almost accidentally, humans began to make sounds. At first, these sounds meant nothing. They were cries of pain, gasps of fear, growls of anger, laughter without reason. But something strange happened. Others reacted. A sudden sharp cry made people turn their heads. A deep growl made children move closer. A repeated sound began to feel familiar. Without realizing it, humans had discovered something powerful. Sound could travel farther than the body. In the dark, when hands could not be seen and faces were hidden, sound carried meaning. A short, sharp noise meant danger. A long, low sound meant calm. A rising tone meant excitement or warning. These weren't words, they were signals, and signals saved lives. Picture a night in the wild. The fire has almost burned out. Shadows move beyond the light. One human hears something in the darkness and releases a quick, high-pitched sound. Others freeze instantly. No explanation needed. The sound itself was the message. Over time, certain sounds were repeated again and again in the same situations. A warning sound before a hunt, a comforting hum near children, a harsh noise during conflict. The brain began to connect sound with meaning, not because someone taught it, but because survival demanded it. This is how communication evolved, not planned, not designed, but forced by danger. But humans didn't stop there. They began to copy sounds from the world around them. The growl of animals, the crack of breaking branches, the rush of wind. Imitation became a tool. A sound that resembled a predator could warn others. A repeated rhythm could gather a group. A softer tone could calm fear. The human voice became flexible. It rose, it fell, it changed shape. And with that flexibility came something new: intention. Humans weren't just making noise anymore. They were choosing when to make it. A single sound could now mean, "Come here," "Stay back," "Pay attention." Still, these sounds were not words. They had no grammar, no names, no sentences. But they were the bridge. A bridge between silent gestures and spoken language. Children learned these sounds by listening. They copied adults, not knowing why, only that it worked. Groups that communicated better survived longer. They hunted more successfully. They protected each other more efficiently. Over generations, the human brain adapted. It became better at recognizing patterns in sound, better at remembering them, better at responding quickly. Communication was no longer just physical. It was becoming vocal. But there was one final challenge. Sounds alone could warn or guide, but they couldn't tell stories. They couldn't describe the past or imagine the future. For that, humans needed something even more powerful. They needed symbols. At first, sounds were only reactions. Cries of fear, grunts of effort, low hums of comfort. But repetition changes things. When the same sound is used again and again in the same moment, the human brain begins to notice a pattern. And patterns are powerful. One sharp sound always came before danger. One soft sound always came near children. One deep sound always meant authority. Slowly, sounds stopped being random. They became signals with purpose. This was the moment communication crossed an invisible line. A sound was no longer just a noise, it stood for something. This is where meaning was born. Imagine a group returning from a hunt. One person points toward the river and makes a specific sound. Others immediately turn in that direction, not because they see the river, but because the sound now represents it. This was revolutionary. For the first time, humans could refer to something that wasn't physically present. Sound had become a symbol. And symbols changed everything. Now humans could coordinate more complex actions. They could plan. They could warn others about things not yet seen. Children learned faster too. They didn't just copy movements anymore. They copied sounds. Their brains began forming connections between sound and memory. Over time, these sounds became more refined. They grew shorter, clearer, easier to repeat. Different groups began using different sounds for the same thing, and this is how early languages began to separate. Not because people decided to speak differently, but because distance and isolation shaped sound in unique ways. But there was still no grammar, no sentences, only clusters of meaningful sounds. Yet even this was enough to change human life forever. Stories began to exist. Not detailed stories, but fragments. A sound for danger, a sound for food, a sound for loss. Elders could warn children about places they had never been. Hunters could explain what went wrong after it happened. For the first time, knowledge could travel through time. And that might be the most important change of all. Before words, wisdom died with the person who learned it. Now, experience could be passed on. A mistake didn't have to be repeated. A discovery didn't have to be rediscovered. Language, even in its earliest form, became humanity's memory. But there was a cost. As sounds grew more meaningful, misunderstandings became possible. One wrong sound could cause fear. One unclear signal could lead to chaos. So humans refined communication even further. Tone mattered, timing mattered, context mattered. The human voice became emotional, flexible, and precise. And the brain evolved alongside it. Areas responsible for sound recognition, memory, and social awareness grew stronger. Communication wasn't just helping humans survive anymore, it was shaping who they were. Yet something was still missing. Sounds could represent objects and actions, but not complex ideas. They couldn't express time clearly. They couldn't explain feelings deeply. They couldn't describe imaginary things. To do that, humans needed structure. They needed rules. They needed grammar. Words did not arrive all at once. There was no moment when humans suddenly invented language. Instead, it grew quietly, layer by layer, over thousands of years. Sounds that once meant only danger or food began to combine. One sound followed another. Meaning became flexible. A sound for food combined with a sound for place, combined with a sound for time. For the first time, humans could describe what was not happening right now. They could talk about yesterday's hunt. They could warn about tomorrow's danger. They could imagine things that did not yet exist. This was the birth of structured language, and it changed everything. With structure came clarity. Humans could explain mistakes instead of repeating them. They could teach children without demonstration. They could plan far ahead instead of reacting in the moment. Knowledge no longer died with the body. It lived on in sound. Around the fire, elders began to speak in patterns, not just signals, but stories. Stories of animals, stories of survival, stories of ancestors who succeeded and failed. These stories shaped behavior. They taught rules. They created shared identity. They turned groups into tribes and tribes into cultures. Language became more than communication. It became connection. With words, humans could express emotion in ways never before possible. Fear could be explained, grief could be shared, love could be named. And naming something gave it power. A feeling that had no name was confusing. A feeling with a name could be understood. Language helped humans understand themselves. It also separated them from every other species on Earth. Animals could warn, animals could signal, but animals could not explain. They could not tell stories. They could not pass abstract ideas across generations. Humans could. And because of that, humans adapted faster than any creature before them. Tools improved, strategies evolved, societies formed, all because sound gained structure. But language didn't just build civilization, it reshaped the human brain. Brains grew larger, social awareness increased, imagination expanded. Humans didn't just react to the world anymore. They described it, they questioned it, they changed it. Every book, every law, every invention you know today traces back to that moment when sound stopped being noise and became meaning. When gestures turned into signals, signals turned into sounds, sounds turned into words, and words turned into history. So the next time you speak, remember this.
Your voice carries thousands of years of survival. Every sentence is built on fear, cooperation, curiosity, and the need to be understood. Language wasn't created for beauty. It was created so humans wouldn't face the world alone. And in learning how to speak, humans didn't just learn to communicate, they learned how to become human.